The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Tonight's episode is Ubuntu and Justice.
Good evening, everyone. I was having such a wonderful chat backstage in the studio with our guest that I almost missed the go live time. You're going to enjoy it just as much as I have when you get to meet her. Her name is Marlena Graves, and she is a writer, a thinker, and a sought-after speaker who brings together spiritual formation and the pursuit of justice. She has a master's in divinity from Northeastern Seminary and a PhD from Bowling Green State University. And that PhD is in culture, immigration, race, and poverty. Marlena draws on a rich mix of pastoral, academic, and advocacy experience. She's the author of The Way Up is Down from 2020, among other books. And in that, she weaves together personal story with timeless wisdom to guide others towards transformation and authentic faith. Welcome to the studio, Marlena.
Thank you, Wade. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's my pleasure. And as you know, we've been working on this now for a couple of months, and it's exciting to have it happen. So first of all, where are you dialing in from?
Rochester, New York. So it's
an hour ahead of me.
Yeah, hour ahead of you. I don't know if it's as cold as where you're at. Maybe it's the same, but it's warming up a little bit this week.
Well, maybe it's coming your way, but we had 60 degrees the other day, and It's been brutal. It's been brutal. The chickens are happy.
Okay.
So we have about 23 chickens and 3 roosters on our property. Gives us and the kids something to do, to get their hands in the dirt with real live things and get connected to nature and God through that. We're going to be talking about not chickens, but more of a social structure and how we treat our neighbors. But before we get into the core topic of your experience and your work, we'd like to get to know you a little bit better by finding out about your early years, your background, where you were born, your parents, the culture that you grew up in, and the forces that shaped you before you really figured out, this is what I want to do with my life.
Yeah, thank you. I always start with telling people that I grew up very poor. I was born in Puerto Rico, lived a few years there, and then came to the United States. Went back to Puerto Rico for 4th grade, but then mostly grew up in northwestern Pennsylvania, where my dad is from. And something I realized, Wade, that I couldn't figure out till, I don't know, maybe after college and during seminary, that I didn't have language for, that people didn't speak a lot about, was how communal my upbringing was, right? Because my abuelita and my grandparents would often live with us. We took care of both sides, my dad's and my mother's parents in our family. We don't often send people to an old folks home. I'm not criticizing anyone that does, but usually it's the family, that takes care of them. And so a communal upbringing affected me, where it wasn't just my goals and what I wanted to do, but I considered, what effect does this have on my family? And so growing up sometimes without food, sometimes without heat in the winter in between paychecks, because we used to have a fuel oil where a truck had to bring fuel and put it in a tank. And if we didn't have enough money or we hadn't paid it, then it was cold. And we had a fireplace, but I think now I learned what the problem was, is the chimney probably needed clean because the smoke would get into the whole house, and I would always smell like smoke, and I was so embarrassed about that getting on the school bus. And growing up in rural Northwest Pennsylvania, we were in the furthest geographic, as far as you can possibly be away from my school. And it was I guess, the biggest geographical district in Pennsylvania. So back then, this is before the internet, before our phones, there was long distance. And so all my friends were long distance, and I couldn't afford to talk to them when I wasn't in school. And also, they were many, like 17 to 18 miles away, depending on which friend it was. So um, that gave me a lot of time. I didn't realize it now, but I think I was just a contemplative child. When I wasn't working or doing homework, we used to have to chop wood to get my dad gas to get to work on Thanksgiving, on Christmas. It didn't matter what day. So when rain or shine, it was wood, cutting wood. When I wasn't doing that, or actually when I was too, I would always think to myself, there's more to life than this. And even from when I was 4 years old, I remember looking up at the moon and realizing that there was something beyond. Um, and so I guess I was a contemplative child, but I loved to just sit alone in the forest, or just be alone and think about God and think about people. And when I don't remember how old I was, maybe fifth grade or sixth grade, um, I preached. I didn't know about St. Francis, but I stood up in this little wooded lot and I painted the rocks white with some extra leftover paint. I stood on my pulpit rock and I preached to my brothers and sisters and a couple other friends and the birds and the trees. Later, I found out that St. Francis did that. And because I thought, the animals are part of creation too. So, from the Christian perspective, I preached the news of Jesus to them. And I think that those experiences, watching my abuelita, who only had a third grade education because her mom died when she was in third grade, and there were 11 people in our family, so she had to go to work. All the kids had to go to work to provide. So she would read her Bible in front of me with a third grade education in Spanish. And I thought to myself, if abuelita reads her Bible, I should, because I love her so much. And she just modeled it without telling me every morning. She would read her Bible. She was Roman Catholic. And I started reading my Bible 2 to 4 hours a day for about 4 years. So I guess I was really shaped by biblical imagination, the teachings of Jesus. And I did go to church. I walked to a church that was a mile away with my siblings, and sometimes people would give us rides. This is the country. Um, but I did not grow up in like evangelical or fundamentalist culture. I think it was like a hybrid Catholic Protestant household. And so I never was taught by people in that culture what women could and could not do. I was never constricted or restricted uh, in my display of faith. And there are a lot of people that grew up in Christianity in America that were in more fundamentalist homes and had that experience. I did not. Um, and so I figured that if God could do stuff that he did for people in the Old and New Testaments, he could do it for me. So I would pray. I'd ask God for things that I thought were impossible, like money to go on a trip, a humanitarian trip when I was 16, for poor people. And my whole life, I've asked God, can you open doors for me? Because obviously, growing up poor, Puerto Rican woman in the country, impoverished of rural America, didn't have any connections. So often people say to me, um, I had a college students once say, Marlene, I don't know why all these good things happen to you. I was like, well, first of all, you haven't seen the hell I went through growing up. So you're just seeing this moment right now. And I know, Wade, you can kind of understand that. You're just seeing this still frame. But also, I pray about everything. And so, yeah, I shouldn't be here. My husband's always like, I don't even know how you came from your family. Not that my parents were bad people, but I was always that at-risk child that you would read about, all the things against you, all the situation against you, the zip code against you. Um, but here I am, and I thank God for it. So I think, to sum it up, maybe one of the things I would say is, I didn't always have confidence, and still now sometimes I don't have confidence in myself, but I have confidence in God's help and God helping me through loving people.
So I'm just floored by what I've just learned, because I knew the tip of the iceberg of your background,
Mhm,
but now you've provided a bunch of detail that I didn't have.
mhm,
And it's amazing, because I think you might know that, I lived in a tent my senior year of high school up in
mhm,
Alaska. And we I had it was a by the time late fall and winter hit, I'd moved from the summer pup tent into an 8-man army tent, which I got from Army surplus for,
mhm,
some like $60 or something, which was really cool. But it was basically, big cloth tent. And but it had this like asbestos stovepipe, so you could have a stove in it.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, I smelled like smoke,
mhm,
right? And I was tent boy my senior
mhm,
year of high school, and
mhm,
we lived off the grid, no water, no electricity. It was a
mhm,
mile to the bus stop, you
mhm,
know, and so on. And I was just relating to your circumstances, and then I was reflecting on how you went to God and you prayed and you got answers.
mhm,
And yet this is balanced out by this awareness from the Bible of Jesus and his teachings around how we should be treating others and what kind of neighbors we should be. So
mhm,
you've got these twin things that would help people from that zip code or those circumstances or with those characteristics that might otherwise be marginalized or left behind or disadvantaged. You've got the two things. You've got God is the father to the fatherless, right?
mhm,
God is the help in aid in need for the widows, and
mhm,
anyone who needs help can go to God.
mhm,
But especially those who can't, who are disadvantaged,
mhm,
God's going to answer their prayers.
mhm.
Maybe not exactly in the way that they want,
Yeah.
but they'll get answered. But at the same time, other people shouldn't be telling people, well, we should be telling people to rely on God, but
Mhm.
we shouldn't be doing the proverbial be you warmed and filled, right? The
Correct.
statement, be
Yes.
you warmed and filled, but you don't give them anything to eat. You
Right.
just say, I'll pray for you. That's not good enough.
Mm-mm.
And I feel like now I'm seeing more of the background of why and how you are in the space you are, but in my view, so centered and balanced in that space.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to hear it through someone else's eyes. Yeah, because I mean, I did pray a lot, but I also had people that would give me rides to church, or my past, or different people helping me, and our family helping one another. I'm still extremely close to my siblings. My mom passed away. My dad's still alive, but yeah, I would not be where I am were it not for God, and also God using other good people to help me. Christian and not. So,
Because as we get into the topic today that we're going to get into in the next segment, um, this topic is so important and so necessary, especially for those who might belong to a church organization that somehow misses the boat on some of this, um, or not being in a church organization and missing the boat on it.
mhm,
But at the same time, this shouldn't be weaponized to be accusatory, to be judgmental, to put labels on people,
mhm,
but rather this should be brought to our awareness so that we can come together.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, it is.
So,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
well, no, I was going to say, so then tell us a little bit about the transition from, riding the bus smelling like smoke, kind of embarrassed, to reaching out, branching out, achieving success with college applications, getting on a path that got you into a different zip code.
Yeah. So I remember distinctly thinking to myself, probably when I was in 11th grade, If I don't get a job, I mean, if I don't go to college, the only thing, and this is not diminishing anyone, but the only job I could see myself doing is being like a cashier at I don't know if it's still there, but it was called Buyer's Fair, which was like a goodness, like a local shop that had all sorts of, tools and knickknacks and things like that. And because I'm like, I don't have any special skills in the trades. I didn't go to Votech, so I don't have a lot of options if I don't go to college. Then the question was, okay, where do I go to college? I don't know, because there's really I didn't have any. I know my dad went to night school for a little bit. At that time, he since went on past that, but I didn't have any guidance in filling out my FAFSA. I had to do everything by myself. I'm like, yeah, students have a lot more help than I had. I had to figure out how to do all this myself because my parents didn't know how. It's not because they didn't care. They just didn't know. It was overwhelming for them. And so I got accepted in Pennsylvania, Penn State, the main campus. And what I didn't know until after I got accepted was they usually send people out to satellite campuses first. And then they go to the main campus. But I'm like, okay, it's a thing. I got accepted to the main campus. That's cool. And I probably would have gotten a full ride. But I didn't go there. I went to a private, what I now know to be a fundamentalist, ultra-conservative Christian school where my pastor's daughter went. It was a Baptistic school, but it wasn't her denomination. I don't know how she had heard of it, maybe through a magazine. And she told me it was a really good school. And at the time, I didn't really know any difference about in Christianity, different denominational distinctives. I just thought there was like Christian universities, not Christian universities. So I was like, I should go to a Christian university to be mentored. And I went there and it really opened up my eyes. I realized just how poor I was. I don't think I knew how poor I was until I went there because I couldn't really even afford books and different types of things. But I also met the best people I've ever met in my life, like the just smartest and kindest. And then I also met the worst people. I'm like, what is this? This is not the Christianity I read about in my house. Like, what is this? And so that was really the first time I was exposed to what I would call the corrupted teachings of Jesus and more teachings about like, for example, I remember so I'm like 18 years old, Wade, and I'm sitting in a chapel, a church, not a semi-church service. The college made us go 5 days a week from 10 to 11, 5 days a week in college. And the president of the university was talking about how Jesus didn't drink wine. It was grape juice. And I remember like looking around, I'm like, what is this? I'm 18 years old, 19 years old. I can't remember if it was my sophomore year, but I was just blown away. I'm like, I've read the Bible, dude, and it says wine every time. And even in the Greek, and I've heard pastors talk about it. So why are you so intent on having to have Jesus drink grape juice? And I said, also, if it was just grape juice, they wouldn't have called him a wine bibber and a drunkard because they criticized him for those things. Because I know my Bible, dude.
Well, and not to mention his first miracle.
Yes, that's right. Turning water into wine. And so I was like,
and serving it to the guests who proclaimed, wow, most people, they bring out the swill at the end when people have had enough to drink. You've saved the best for last. It wasn't grape juice.
Yeah. And so I was like, do you guys believe that? Like, is anyone as like, I don't know if the word was outraged, but just like appalled as I was. And I don't know. I didn't see a lot of people. I mean, what are they going to stand up and object during this service? So that was really, I think, the first time I started to be like, I can't believe everything that comes out of that pulpit or that teaching. And so slowly, 18, 19, 20, I was starting to distill like what I think was, the core teachings of Jesus and what was more cultural. But again, I'm saying that now because I have words for it, but I wouldn't have put it exactly that way at that time. And so I would say then is when I got the distaste for performative and fundamentalist Christianity, where you care more about outward appearance and different things than one's relationship with Jesus. And it still continues to this day. My distaste for that, because I'm like, I expected to go to a Christian college and feel like heaven. And I was like, this is not heaven. Might not be hell, but it's not heaven. So that's where I kind of made my pivot. I'm like, okay, I know what Jesus is like. And being here, I know what it's not like. Like Jesus is not like. I know Jesus is like this from my experience growing up and everything I had. I'm like, this stuff, this other extra stuff, not Jesus. And so I think that was the kind of the first, like I never heard, they had sermons about like going on missions trips to help the poor in other countries, but not anything about racism or any of the stuff going on. Or like at that time it was it the Iraq war, the first, I don't know which. I think we were done with it then, but still there was, they only talked about mostly just missionaries and no social issues. So it was more of like you following Jesus as an individual. But again, let me say this before I finish. I met some of the best and smartest and brightest people there, and they're still my friends. So I think just a lot of places that you go, there could be really great people and not so great people, or just maybe the word's not great people, maybe more deceived people.
Well, and it's really not black and white, right? It's a big gray scale.
Mm-hmm.
And none of us have all the answers. None of us
Right.
understand it perfectly. And usually there's some grain of truth, even in some of the most weird ideas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it so we do this little program. I won't go into it. Maybe a little bit later. But I think session 5 and 6, or at 6 and 7, talk about how Jesus and all the other messengers of God, no matter who they were,
Mm-hmm.
tell you to hold fast to their teachings, to not deviate, right? But then they also say, like Jesus did, you can't put new wine in old wineskins.
Yeah.
So they tell us not to be rigid
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and not to and not to be closed-minded, to remain open to the divine spirit, to the Holy Spirit, to the teachings from God, and how they breathe and how they live, right? So you have this yin yang, which is therefore not surprising that you saw good and bad people. And it's not the people who have good ideas and people who have bad ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who have a good perspective on this, that, or the other topic,
Yeah.
and people who have a
Yes.
bad perspective on this,
Yes.
that, or the other topic. And all variations and all shades. And the idea of consultation and discussion, if you're open to it, is where, iron sharpens iron.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like how you put it, because it's like a spectrum, right? It's not, you're right. There's a spectrum. And also we have to take into perspective how those people grew up, what they were exposed to, what they weren't exposed to. And I just thought, hey, everyone would obviously knew what I did, but that is a young mind's view when you're like 18 or 19 years old. So hopefully I'm a lot more gracious than I was back then, in my mind at least.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to go to our first commercial break. When we come back, we'll dive into a little deeper about what happened after that experience. Where did you go next?
Mm-hmm.
But first, a word from one of our sponsors. We'll be right back.
There's a growing movement of people rethinking what their faith really means. Many Christians feel their old version of faith no longer fits, and they're looking for something clearer, something real. David Gashi has become a trusted voice for those searching for a more honest, examined kind of belief. In this book, he explores 40 teachings from all 4 Gospels, focused on what Jesus said about living a moral life. It has been quite a while since a focused treatment of the moral teachings of Jesus has been attempted in Christian ethics. The last major effort was over a century ago, during the social gospel era. This book brings that conversation into today, clear, timely, and finally updated. It's written for preachers, teachers, seekers, skeptics, and anyone unsure of what their faith truly asks of them. Each chapter breaks down the language, context, and meaning. The focus stays on one thing: the moral teachings of Jesus, and what they could mean for us now. David Gashi shows that Jesus' moral vision is thoughtful, challenging, and deeply meaningful for modern life. The Moral Teachings of Jesus, Available now on Amazon.
And we had David Gushee on the show about a month ago, episode 212, if anybody wants to check out that full episode. But you were experiencing your own journey of understanding how the moral teachings of Jesus were or were not adopted. So what was the next step you took after that experience? I assume you completed that program and got a degree, or did you move on partway through? Or
Yeah, no, I finished. I got a bachelor's degree in history and secondary education and a minor in philosophy. Met my husband in a philosophy class. He's a literal philosopher like Gushee. He's a philosophy professor. And so we went, he wasn't at that moment, but we went to school for him to get his PhD, and we kind of moved around for that for him to get jobs. And I was just the more I saw, the more when I'm like, oh, I think I was wrong about that. Different things that happened in the world. I was taught one way, and I'm like, it absolutely has to be this way. And I'm talking about like more political things. And I said, well, if this happens, then I will change, or if this doesn't happen, I will change my mind. And wow, it didn't happen. So I had to back up and re-examine, like, what did I think about politics? Because I said I had to make a turn, because I said, if this is not true, then I can't keep believing this just because I want to. There's no evidence of it. And so also just working in nonprofits with the poor, a lot of the jobs. So my husband moved around we moved around for his education before I got my PhD a little bit ago. And I would just pick up nonprofits jobs that I was qualified for. I did get offered a teaching job, teaching 11th grade government in one of the poorest counties of southeastern Ohio, where my husband was getting his master's at Ohio University, not Ohio State, Ohio University. And I was also offered at the same time a job in a nonprofit that paid like $10,000 more and had better benefits. So I took the nonprofit, and that closed the door, Wade, on my teaching career, because I could have went to the teaching way. But so I did a lot of since that time, I worked with a lot of poor people. And now I think a lot of the jobs that I had now require masters of social work degrees. But then my education experience allowed me to do them. And I saw poverty in Appalachia. That's how they say Appalachia. The worst poverty I saw was among, Caucasian people in Appalachia, because, you live out in the country, you're far away from cities, you don't have gas to get there. So you don't have a lot of the benefits of the social programs that maybe a more populated area has, because you don't have transportation to them. I worked with people of color trying to get their education go up higher. So I worked with a lot of poverty. I've worked with migrant farm workers, the people that pick our fruit and vegetables, Christmas trees, many who will not go to work right now because of what's happening in our country in the United States. I worked with the NAACP and other organizations trying to prevent police brutality, where I lived in the Toledo, Ohio area. And so I feel like I've been around a lot of poverty and poverty alleviation. And I didn't have any problem, how do I say this, interacting with people in poverty, because I myself know what it was like. And I know some of the poor people I knew, some of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life. It was just, what jobs are available to you when you have a certain education, or. So I think that helped form my worldview. And I would tell you this was probably a crucial and transition point when I was in southeastern Ohio, and government funding was cut for the programs, for the food programs and the educational programs I was a part of. It wasn't because, we were targeted, our particular nonprofit at Ohio University. It was just the entire state of Ohio. They cut the TANF funds, which stands for Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. And I was like, this policy is putting people in hunger, because I know that our programs fed some of these kids after school, and they didn't have anything to eat. We taught them how to read. And I was just flabbergasted. I couldn't believe that politicians would cut the funding from people that needed it the most. This was not misused funds. These were funds to the poorest people in the state of Ohio. And then that's what I was like, okay, there's something wrong here. Why are these getting cut when they're being put to such good use? And so that was a major transition in my life. I'm like, okay, there's something wrong with policy here. There's something wrong with policy. And the other thing was, I had a lot of my fellow Christians tell me, well, it's not the government's job to help the poor. That's a Christian job. And I'd be like, well, that's fine and well, but do you have enough money to fund someone's insurance for a year? Just one family's insurance? Like, we literally don't have enough money to provide all that is needed for the number of people in America in poverty. So the government needs to help, because there's no way the church is going to do it unless we cut all of our incomes by like 75 to 80% and give the rest of it away. And I don't even know if that will make it. So that's when I really had a significant change, because before I was taught, it's the church's job to provide, or, nonprofits, it's not the government. Well, it turns out we can't provide for that many people on a mass scale without the government.
Yeah, it's a fascinating set of challenges, right? And many dimensions to it. I'm reminded of a quote by Einstein. It's my favorite quote. I've used it frequently on the show. He said, "Things should be made as simple as they can be, and no simpler." Right. So we don't want to oversimplify, but at a high level, the church and that social moral conscience that is extremely clear in the teachings of Jesus. And by the way, Moses, right? If you think about Moses and when he lived, and you go back to that time, and so advanced in terms of its social teachings.
Yeah.
We can look at it anachronistically and judge it, within the lens of what's called presentism, right? Which is a negative, view of things in the past based on our standards of today. But the Bible and religious leaders have always taught this same thing about caring for the poor, taking care of those who are in need, and who is my neighbor, who is my brother, any and everybody. In Matthew 25, the separation of the sheep and the goats is all around this issue, right? How we treat those who are less advantaged. But the laws of Moses and the social structure was to set up a society in which these things were taken care of. So government does play a role. So no, it's not right to say this is the role of the church and this is the role of the government when it comes to providing physical, material means. Interestingly, in Matthew 25, it says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, he will judge the nations. And now the separation of sheep and goats is based on individuals, but he says he's going to judge the nations and separate them, the collective groups of people who behave. Some nations do a good job taking care of their poor, some do a less good job, and some do a terrible job. Some nations persecute their minorities. Others may fail to adequately provide equal opportunity. Others may, allow certain ones to fall through the cracks. But the point is, as society grows and evolves, we have to do this at a societal scale, at a governmental scale, right? Which is, I think, what you're getting at.
Yeah, I think it's both individual and governmental. So I think when we think about justice and, everyone's problem is my problem. And some people say, well, no, that means you don't have boundaries. But what I mean is, if you don't have some of the basics, food, education, water, electricity, whatever, that is my problem. In America, we're very excuse me, let me throw that out. I'm so used to saying in the United States, because I do believe there's several nations in the Americas. In the United States, we're very individualistic and kind of have the attitude that's not my problem. But as you mentioned earlier, and maybe we're going to talk about more with Ubuntu, it is our problem. Jesus, other people's if I'm my brother's and sister's keeper, and that's what God in the Old Testament basically chided Cain for when he killed his brother Abel. Cain, when God came to him and God said, Cain, where's your brother Abel?" And Cain's like, "Well, I'm not my brother's keeper. Why are you asking me about him? Why should I be worried? It's his business. His business is not my business." But that's not the way of Jesus, and it shouldn't be the way of Christians. And I, I particularly have a strong passion for Christians because some of us proclaim so loudly we follow Jesus, but don't act like him. I would rather not proclamations be made, and
Wait, are
then
you saying, are you alluding to that quote from Jesus? Why do you call me Lord, Lord,
yeah,
and don't do the things that I say?
yeah. And I say that to myself too, because uh, you would remember, as Paul, one of them says, not many of you should be teachers because you will be
Right.
judged more strongly. So I know that for myself, and so I try to live out what I talk about and teach. But to hear Christian leaders and pastors teach against empathy and compassion and helping the poor, uh, I don't know what Jesus they're thinking about, because it's not the Jesus of historic Christianity or the Bible.
But I'd like to take one little example, and this is sort of unpacking the concept of Ubuntu that you've introduced,
Mm-hmm.
which I want to hear more about. One example is in the modern world, because of the way society has evolved, the nuclear family, and even feminism, the modern woman is kind of expected to want and have it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're an example of that kind of a superwoman who has, I don't know if you have children,
Yeah,
but
three girls.
so you have 3 children, and you're married, and you have a PhD, and you have a career, so you have it all. But in our society, what you may or may not have is that support network that your family had growing up. You
Mm-hmm.
talked about being more almost like in a village environment in
Mm-hmm.
your early years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where and your grandmother, if I got the Spanish translation correctly,
Yeah,
because I don't
yeah.
speak Spanish, but so that's no longer in place because we've driven so strongly in the direction of a nuclear family
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
a society structure and an economy
Mm-hmm.
in which families don't stay together locally. They move around the country and they're all split up, and we may or may not have a network. And the church, various churches in some ways try to fill in for this. And
Mm-hmm.
that may be what that woman was referring to. Well, that's the role of the church to be the extended family, the church to be the village,
Mm-hmm.
since we don't have extended families. But this fragmentation and this isolation leads to women being under enormous stress to try to accomplish all this without the help of extended family. I mean, and then you have to set up daycare and all kinds of issues and problems that we wouldn't have if we structured society differently.
Yeah, let me be quick to say that my husband did a lot of the labor so that I can go into a PhD program. I had friends. Here's where the village comes through. I'm like, I can't go to my daughter's soccer. Can you take my daughter to soccer practice? So we had to rely on my husband's mother a lot. Like, I could not get my PhD by myself. I relied on a lot of people, including my pastors, my husband, people from church, friends, to help me out, because there's no way I could have done it by myself. The thing with society too, and I just want to add to this is another program, Wade, but it's also because you have to have 2 people working to even be able to survive, right? A minimum wage job is no longer enough to pay for an apartment, even if you work 40 hours a week at minimum wage. So uh, um, the economic issues, and I do think that this stress on individualism has, not that you shouldn't chase your passions and what you want to do, but people think they do it themselves and they never do. It's always on other people's shoulders and with other people's help, whether they realize it or not. Could be a job reference from someone that you would have had if you hadn't asked. So all that to say is that um, I think that's a reason for the isolation and loneliness epidemic. Now, there is that even in communities of color, but I know that maybe you know more than I do. Asian communities and Hispanic and even African American communities, they're more communal than traditionally Caucasian communities. Um, and so, yeah, I do think that we have the false idea, the false notion that we got to do this by ourselves, but we cannot. I could not, and I still can't actually. I still cannot do it. I can't be in 7 places at one time. I mean, right now, my husband is with one of my daughters and another's doing something so that I could be here talking to you in peace.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about Ubuntu before we go into the break.
Yeah, thank you to the African and African American communities for putting me onto this. I read a little bit about it in my PhD program. But what I love about it is that they believe every single person is a genius and that we have something to learn from them in a community. Now, people can reject the community or they can go rogue and hurt and harm and destroy, like Cain. But they all believe that the community is what helps us flourish together. So, for example, I think the best example of this that we're seeing in the United States is what's happening in Minneapolis, where everyone and their brother, Christian, non Christian, different religions, stay at home moms, not stay at home moms, everybody is watching out for each other in Indianapolis with what was happening with ICE and DHS. That to me is a modern current example of Ubuntu. Watching out for everybody, the businesses, that's what you do. We watch out for each other.
The the good of one is the good of all, the harm to one is the harm of all. Is there sort of a better formulation or translation of that term?
Well, you said it. You said it well. Martin Luther King Jr. said we're all interconnected. I just when I talk to students is like there's two ways. My flourishing is tied to your flourishing, Wade. Even though I'm not in the same town, right? In the Christianity, as you know, they use the body metaphor. And if one part of the body is hurting, if you stubbed your toe, that'll affect your ability to walk and do other things. And so I really believe in that teaching of Jesus and in that concept of Ubuntu that I think it's really, the teaching of Paul that really shows that we're all interrelated and that what happens to one that I can't truly flourish if you're not flourishing, if my neighbors aren't flourishing. And that means we're going to have to be a little bit generous and not hoard for ourselves, because how can we hoard everything for ourselves when our neighbors can't even eat?
Well, and it says in the Bible that God sends rain on the just and unjust alike. And it's not really just about rain. It's also about spiritual awareness and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
The Spirit of God in the opening verses of Genesis moved across the waters, plural. Mm-hmm. God's Spirit is always traveling, always working. It's pervasive. So we have these concepts in different cultures, such as namaste, in coming from the Hindu culture, which is that same thing about there's genius in everyone. The light in me salutes the light in you. That's the meaning of the term namaste. And concepts like this exist all over the world with all peoples who are seeking, to understand and to build, a just and equitable society. And you have all these different experiments, some of them gone awry, some of them gone badly, that at their heart have, similar desires to structure our lives and society in a way that's helpful. So in the United States of America, a state in the 19th century being a nation, 50 nations, if you will, coming together with a federal government, state, local, and then also NGOs, right? A church is an NGO in that sense, right? All of these things working together to try to structure a more just society. I would say at the spiritual level, the title of this show, Created in the Image of God, which evokes sovereignty, to be honest. we're created in God's image, male and female. It says he created them, and each of them stood sovereign before God. It wasn't until the introduction of what was represented by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the desire to take to oneself the prerogative to choose.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't until that moment that we began to lose our sovereignty and trend away from the light towards darkness from time to time, and then become enslaved to each other and to our passions
Mm-hmm.
and to the negative results that came from that. But God's intent was that we be sovereign. This is evident when Paul later says, mature Christians, those who are ready for strong meat, use their senses to discern good and evil. Strong
Mm-hmm.
meat belongs to those who, by reason of use, have exercised their senses to discern good and evil. So to regain that higher path, to begin to regain that sovereignty, to be like God and to discern good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
What am I getting at here? That created in the image of God, the title of the show evokes that sovereignty, but then the subtext is building vibrant communities
Mm-hmm.
where we submit our desires, our wants, our sovereignty to the needs of others, right? Where we esteem others better than ourselves, think not everyone on his own things, but on the things of others.
Mm-hmm.
So we voluntarily humble ourselves. We voluntarily abase ourselves to become servants to other people. And that's actually the highest calling. The highest calling, the greatest freedom, the greatest reward, the greatest joy comes from serving other people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it reminds me, and this is where some corrupt Christian theology comes out. So, for example, when I lived in the Toledo, Ohio area, the Islamic temple, the mosque, they had a huge food pantry. They were the first ones giving food out to people. And some churches said, I'm not going to work with them because they're Muslims. I was like, what? Like, these Muslims, they have the infrastructure already created. They didn't have to start from scratch. It was, I think, started by a medical doctor, a cardiologist in the community. And so they already had the infrastructure and everything to get the food out to people. And they already had all the mechanisms and logistics down. And so they were like a hub of food distribution. But some churches said, I'm not going to work with them because they're Muslims. And I found that incredibly ridiculous. And our church worked with them. Our church is like, yeah, we'll send our food here and they'll distribute it. And so that's what I mean when, like what you're saying, everyone's created in the image of God. The Muslim imam, the Muslim friends that worship in the mosque, and they were doing something good. Why would I oppose that just because they're not exactly like me? They were loving their neighbors in a very concrete way.
Yeah, we're gonna go to a quick commercial break. When we come back, I want to unpack that a little bit more, going directly to the Bible and showing how the Bible supports what you just said. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
In a world increasingly disoriented and lacking spiritual values, many are turning to religion as a source of inspiration and comfort. Each person chooses their individual path, and if there is one thing we are known for, it's providing a positive platform for diverse points of view, to provide each of us the opportunity to discern truth for ourselves. Something or Other Publishing is proud to announce the creation of Royal Falcon Press imprint, to feature the unparalleled talent of multiple writers who will bring uplifting and thought-provoking contributions to the body of religious literature, offering current spiritual insights and practical solutions to the challenges we face. Let's grow together as one of the most substantial spiritual communities on the internet. Register and explore a new way to achieve universal wisdom, and reinforce your faith with all the surprises Royal Falcon Press has in store for you.
And I guess there was no way to register or to get more information. So you can go to info@soupllc.com. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat so that everybody can see it. Info@soupllc.com. That's from Something or Other Publishing, also known as Soup Media now, in the Royal Falcon Press. So right before the break, you were mentioning a mosque where Muslims were doing good works. So I know where some of the scriptures are that those Christians would go to support their position.
Mhm.
I'm not going to spend a moment on going to those because there are plenty of others that would lead you to understand you can't take those verses out of context. Things like, he that is not against us is with us, Jesus said, right?
Mhm.
Let's think of some other ones. Paul in the Agora and the statue to the unknown God,
Mhm.
right? Now these are pagans. These are pagan, polytheistic worshipers of who knows what, all the gods. And Paul didn't berate them.
Mhm.
He didn't judge them. He saw this statue to the unknown God. They were so religious in kind of a superstitious way that they're like, well, in case we missed one of the gods, because there are a lot of them, we better erect one so that the unknown God won't come and punish us.
Yeah.
Sorry if we didn't know about you. Paul doesn't take it the negative way.
Mhm.
He says he commends them for being very religious and very observant.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then he says, there is an unknown God, and I'm here to proclaim him to you. So
Mhm.
he uses that as an example. And again, some of these materials that I referenced earlier that we've worked on through the Royal Falcon Press, the Creating the Image of God show sponsoring with Royal Falcon Foundation and Royal Falcon Press, something called The Facets of One, in which we show that all the religions of the planet teach that there's one God.
Mhm.
In Arabic, that God's name is Allah because that's the Arabic word for God. What is the Spanish word for God?
Dios.
Dios, right? It's Dieu in French. It's Bog in Russian. It's Gott in German. It's Gud in Swedish, right? And who knows what other languages. Sometimes it's a very long word in some indigenous languages.
Mhm.
And in the Maori tradition, I think it's lo, L-O, lo.
Mhm.
These are just different words for God. It's because we all speak different languages.
Mhm. Mhm.
And to get hung up on the word Allah and say they worship a different God is very ignorant. It's just ignorant. I don't mean that even negatively. It's just a lack of it's a lack of education, or it's
Yes.
having been somewhat misinformed.
Mhm. Yeah, 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 I know. Yeah, I know all the backs and forths about why people would say this or that or the other. Pro and con to what you said, but I have to say that I just think when I'm going to be judged, is God going to say to me, "Oh, Marlena, you didn't give because you didn't want to work with your Muslim brother?" Um, and I do tell other people that get upset about such things. I said, even Jesus called the Samaritan good. The Samaritan, from the Jewish perspective, has very questionable theology, may not even be a true Jew, but Jesus called him the Good Samaritan because of what he did to help other people. And the people that we were not supposed to be like were like the Levite and the priest that went around the man that was beaten on the road to Jericho. So I think, that Jesus would agree, and a lot of other teachers would agree, like that we are supposed to help, as you say, those that are less advantaged than we are. All the major world religions teach that. So,
Well, and I think the most powerful example, the entire book of Matthew is about judgment, right?
mhm.
Matthew 7, judge not, lest ye be judged,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And then we're told also, of course, to judge righteous judgment. But what is righteous judgment? Well, don't judge outwardly. Don't judge just by, what you see on the surface.
Mhm.
See it with the eyes of God, and then God informs us how to see it. And then he shows us how, as we get to the final parables of Matthew, you have the virgins, right? 10 virgins, 5 wise, 5 foolish, but all 10 of them fell asleep.
Mhm.
They were all sleeping
Mhm.
when the bridegroom came.
Mhm.
And even worse, I studied the parable about the sheep and the goats
Mhm.
because I had to give this sermon in Estonia. I was the first pastor of the Worldwide Church of God in Estonia. I left that organization. I resigned from it, and then joined one of 2 big splinter groups from it. And then that splinter group split up further. And so I was several churches removed from that congregation that I had been the first pastor of. But they invited me back for an anniversary, and I'm no longer part of their church.
Mhm. Mhm.
And these are people that really care about if you're in our church or not in our church, right?
Mhm.
But because I was a peacemaker, broadly speaking, I got an invite back from the president of the global organization.
Mhm.
And so I gave a sermon on the sheep and the goats. And as I was studying for this sermon, I asked myself, how can we as individuals end up being a sheep and not a goat?
Mm.
We
Mhm.
all think we're sheep, right? We're
Yeah.
not the goats, right?
Yeah.
How do you know? And how can you you know really think deeply about this? You mentioned you were contemplative as a child and spent hours communing with God and thinking and reading. How can we really know? And that's when I realized there's very little difference between the sheep and the goats.
Mm.
And like the virgins who all slept, something emerged from this story about the sheep and the goats. You know the story. Jesus, said the sheep are the ones who gave the glass of water to the thirsty person, who visited the person in jail, who visited the person in the hospital, who
Mhm.
gave them something to wear. And the goats were the ones who didn't.
Mhm.
When Jesus told them, the sheep, you gave it to me, and the
Mhm.
goats, you didn't give it to me, they both said the same thing. The thing they both said was, when did we see you?
Mhm.
So none of them recognized Jesus,
Mm. Mhm.
right? So in this sense of identity and identifying as a Christian and who else is a Christian,
Mm.
none of them recognized Jesus. That's
Mhm.
pretty profound. When did we see you?
Mhm.
And so why did the sheep do what they did and the goats do what they did? And the answer that I came to, which I shared in the sermon, is the sheep weren't concerned about who was and who wasn't a Christian,
Mhm.
and the goats were.
Mm. Mhm.
Concerned about identity.
Mm.
Because obviously if they had recognized that person, they would have given it to them.
Mm.
And this comes to the whole concept of othering, right? And people that don't look like us,
Mhm.
we don't identify with, but it goes beyond just the outward characteristics. It goes towards affiliation, identity.
Mhm.
Um, and the bottom line is, I came to the conclusion that the only way to be sure you're to be a goat, to not be a goat, is to be indiscriminate in your love and in
Mhm.
your giving.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
if you're giving to somebody, it's not based on merit or worth
Mhm.
at all.
Yeah.
And God spared my life in a supernatural accident when I was 19. I was in a high-speed chase with the state troopers pursuing me,
Mm.
and I ran off the road at 100 miles an hour when God spared my life. And I
Mhm.
think that was a pivotal point, because I realized God didn't do me a favor because I was being a good boy.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, God doesn't want us to show selective compassion and love, and that's what some people are doing, and Jesus teaches against that. Everyone's flourishing is tied to my flourishing, no matter what your identity is.
To your point earlier about even your enemies.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, Jesus, like, you have to love your enemies.
And the only way you can do that is to not view them as enemies, to get
Yeah.
over them being your enemies, to not see them as others. Because it's easy to be, and we notice this in our own faith community, to be honest, in our own circles.
Mhm.
And I'm not judging anyone else. I mean, I try to look at myself in the mirror and say, do I do this?
Mhm.
Do I other people in the name of not othering people? Right? Do I other people who I believe are othering people?
Yeah, no, I got you. Yeah, the people that it's hard, the people that are hurting other people, that's hardest for me. And I have to remember they're human beings made in the image of God, and God loves them. And so I cannot dehumanize them the way that I see them dehumanizing other people. Because I could do the
Amen.
same thing because of what they're doing.
Well, and the bottom line is they have their reasons for doing what they're doing. They think that they're right.
Mhm.
They think that their discrimination is correct.
Mhm.
Just like I think my discrimination is correct.
Mhm.
I'm discriminating against them
Mhm.
because they deserve to be discriminated against.
Mhm.
Says who?
Mhm.
You follow me?
Yeah, I mean, Jesus is scandalous. So Jesus scandalizes me with the kind of love he requires of us. And I will be the first to say I do not do that perfectly and that I ask for God's help continually.
None of us do. So
Mhm.
we're gonna not go to another commercial break. We're gonna just jump right into some audience comments here to conclude. But before we do, is there anything you want to share? Because I shared some of my thoughts here, and I want to make sure you have ample opportunity to respond to any of that.
No, you said a lot of really good things. It's just, I guess, um, I think I would say, as a Christian, I would say we as Christians can not say we are not our brothers and sisters keepers. It's inconvenient. We're not their saviors, but we should be concerned about others people's welfare and flourishing. It doesn't mean we could provide everything for them, but like you said in the opening, we can't say, "Hey, you're hungry, you need something to eat. God bless you. I'll just pray for you." No, be well fed. No, if we have the means to help other people, we need to do what we can with what we have.
Well said. So let's go into a couple of audience comments or questions. This one was back when you were sharing your background. Um, do you ever wonder what God has kept you from? I know you said you had a lot of hardships, but knowing that God is with you from such a young age, I'm just curious. In other words, did those hardships prepare you in such a way that had you had it maybe less hardships, things would have been very
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
in maybe a bad way?
Yeah, I actually wrote a book about that, A Beautiful Disaster. But what I'm saying is I would never wish hardship or suffering on anyone. But I'm sorry, I don't want to say obviously, to the person that asked the question, absolutely. I would not be the person I am today without having gone through that suffering. I used to ask God, like, why did you make me this way? Why does this have to happen to me? Other people aren't going through this. It's only in retrospect that I can see how that has formed and shaped me. So yeah, yeah, I mean, I could have gone down so many paths to cope with the difficulty and suffering, but I think just being, for me, being rooted in scripture and God's word and knowing that God cared for me and loved me and listened to my prayers, I think kept me from trying to cope with it myself in negative ways. Not to say that I didn't ever do anything wrong, but yeah, I do not think I would be the person I am today without having the life I lived. So,
Yeah, here's another one similar, maybe slightly different, from Holy Mustard. Thank you for your comment question. I found that poverty was needed, at least in my life, to appreciate and work so hard to get where I am today. Curious if that's how you feel today.
oh, that's a good question. Well, I would say that people say I have a good work ethic, but that's from probably having to, split and cut and load wood for stuff until we were done. Yeah, I mean, and saying this to Holy Mustard, um, I just am careful to say that I am not the only reason that I am where I am today. It's because of the grace and the goodness of other people. But I think I appreciate hard work, but I also know that you can work really, really hard. For example, think about women in Africa who have to walk miles and miles with water on their head. They're hard workers, but because of the economy and the life, they don't get ahead because there's no options for them. So I just want to be careful. I hear what you're saying, and I know you're not saying that, but I just want to be careful to say that people could work really hard and still not earn enough money. But I do think that poverty has helped me. Yeah, I don't want to go without food, and I don't want my daughters to go without food. So I want to do everything I can to avoid that if I can.
Yeah, it's interesting. Jesus said he came so that we might have life
Mhm,
and life more abundantly, and
mhm,
you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. There are those statements. And then we have God as a father to the
mhm.
fatherless.
Yes,
But that doesn't mean we should want anyone to be fatherless
that's
or
right. That's right.
motherless.
That's right. That's right. I think, yeah, that's
And
right.
the way that God can be a father to the fatherless is to bring other fathers and mothers into our lives.
Yeah.
He can inspire other people to provide that
Hmm.
and to help them. So, it's kind of a negative proverb that if you've really suffered, you're going to have a hard time getting out of that cycle,
Hmm.
right? Um, but with God's help, we can overcome those challenges that we had and retain the empathy and the desire to help others.
Hmm.
Um, there were times when, in my experience, I felt completely abandoned,
Hmm.
very painful, and that was worse than the circumstances
Hmm.
themselves,
Yeah.
is to feel like there's nobody who cares,
Yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah.
and even somebody who's willing to do a little bit. And I remember one episode in the tent where I stupidly was trying to light the stove with gasoline, and I burned my face really
Oh.
badly, and, and it was horrible. I mean, this is like the low point, and there was a youth group in the other church that sent me a gift and a care package, and
Mm-hmm.
it included some cassette tapes of music that
Hmm.
they knew I would like,
Hmm.
and it meant so much.
Hmm.
And, one of them sent me like $10 in an envelope
Oh,
because
yeah.
it's like I didn't have money to buy candles to have
Yeah.
light in the tent. You know what I mean? So those little things meant so much.
Yeah. That's right. I like how people saying you've probably heard this. Being remembered remembers us, puts us back together. So if you have the nudge to write someone a card, to call them, to send them a text, please do that. You never know how that works. To send a care package like Wade was sent, please don't let that go by.
Um, so I think this was related to when we said, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do the things that I say?" There's a scripture about doing the things you don't want to.
Mhm.
Probably many of them. I don't know if any come to your mind in terms of the admonition and maybe reaching out or trying to share something for those churches that maybe feel they're more exclusive and more focused on um, you know perfection, right? Because we're also told to become perfect like our Father in heaven is perfect. And
Mhm.
then there is moral codes that we're supposed to live by. And there are churches that, emphasize those things.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if you have any words for some of those kinds of churches that you were addressing
Yeah,
in your book in 2020.
it's in, I don't know, one of the epistles, maybe James. I can't look it up now on Google, but uh from the King James that I learned it when I learned it at the time, he who does not do what he knows he ought to do is sin. So like you should do something, but you sin, or let's put it this way. I mean, I like thinking of like life and death. We unleash destruction in the world, even if it's a little bit. So if I know I'm supposed to help somebody, maybe I have to do a reverse and turn around and get some food for that person that's begging for food, even though I'm on my way to go do something else, right? People are like, "Don't help me." I'm like, "You can ask them if they're hungry, and if they're hungry, you can give them something to eat." Yeah, yes. I mean, sometimes you got to do what you don't want to do, and it's also in. I think you referred to this, Wade, Philippians chapter 2. Again, the Bible's not talking about opening yourself to abuse and toxicity, but sometimes I'm not going to be able to do the things. I have to sacrifice myself, lose my life, Jesus says, so that I'll gain it. So it can't be all about me, right? I will be, this is not always easy. It's inconvenient. And a lot of times we need the wisdom of the community to know how to best love other people and to seek their flourishing, because we don't have all the answers by ourselves.
Amen. I remember, to try to help model this a little bit for our kids, we would drive around. We would try to always have like a box of granola bars
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
in the car. So at least we could hand out a granola bar, if nothing
mm-hmm,
else,
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
to some of the people that were standing there. And maybe they didn't want food. Maybe they wanted, something else. But at least we could show that we cared and that we were thinking about them.
Yeah, yeah, yep. And maybe that act of kindness, Wade, reminded them that they weren't abandoned. Maybe in a way, like the way when you got that care package and those cassettes and those $10. We never know. We will never know the implications of. I say people about following Jesus. We will never know the implications of obedience. Maybe one day someone will, in the hereafter, will learn. But you remember that time when you gave me something? It's probably good that we don't know. People get big heads or something from every good deed they did.
Well, and we're out of time. We're actually over time. I didn't realize how much, because I was really enjoying the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So got to wrap it up. But there's one more comment here, and then I'll invite you to provide closing remarks. This one, he also condemned people doing wrong by him, though, turning tables over, etc. Right?
Yes,
Of course,
right.
the context here is not individuals, but rather a structure and a system, right? The money changers
Mm-hmm.
in the temple. It
Yeah.
was a society. It was a system,
Mm-hmm.
right? That was oppressive and counterproductive.
Yeah, and using God to make money, using God as an accessory so that they could sell their wares, whether the animals or whatever. And Jesus said, my house is supposed to be a house of prayer, but they used the temple, the synagogue, the religion to enrich themselves. And instead of, again, he said it's supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations, but you're enriching yourself off the poor. Yeah, it was a system. That's right. And I do agree that with Leprechaun here, that we're supposed to, challenge unjust systems, because you might take that as turning over tables, because that hurts people, destructive systems. And so that's something that Christians can join other people in doing. And I would always say nonviolently, but you can metaphorically turn over tables and saying, hey, this is not right. And I see a lot of people doing that today.
Thank you. So what final words would you like to leave the audience with today?
That's a good question. Just do what you can to seek the flourishing of the other. And if you don't know how to seek other people's flourishing, start where you are in your local community to seek others flourishing. And if you don't know what to do, depend on the wisdom of the community. You can come up with what your neighbors need together. Your neighbors and people in the local community know what they need. And maybe you can just join them, because that's what I have to do.
And the first thing is to get to know them, right?
That's right.
So we didn't really emphasize your work enough. I've just put in the chat. The Way Up is Down, right? By Marlena Graves. And I don't actually see your name so I'm going to put that in here too. Just so that if anybody isn't aware of the spelling, there it is. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So they can look up the Way Up is Down by Marlena Graves. They can find you. Possibly, do you have a website?
Yeah, MarlenaGraves.com.
MarlenaGraves.com. So, what can they expect to find at your website? A variety of books, right? And what else?
Yeah. It needs to be places that I've spoken. If they want to contact me through email, they can contact me there. I think articles I've written are links to them. They'll find right on there.
Awesome. And I hope you will check out Marlena and her work. And I would love to have you back to dive more deeply into these topics. And what are you working on now? Is there something new coming out?
Yes, I owe a manuscript, me and my husband, to InterVarsity Press. It's going to be on Matthew 11:28 through 30, where Jesus says, come to me, all you who are tired and exhausted, and I will give you rest. And so I'm trying to flesh out maybe what that would mean in our current context, in our contemporary environment. What does Jesus mean by rest? And how can I have rest when everything is stressing me out around me? So that's kind of what we're thinking about. And okay, what does Jesus mean, and how do we work that out into our lives?
Wonderful. So obviously, if you're still working on the manuscript, we don't have a publication date yet. But as it gets closer, and as we have something on the horizon, let us know, because I would love to have you back.
Thank you. It's been a real delight to be here, Wade, and to work with you.
And I know you're an hour ahead, so you may need to cut out early. We're going to do one more thing, which is to air the sneak peek, which is a few minutes. If you want to hang around and chat afterwards, you're welcome to. Otherwise, you and I can catch up later.
Okay.
But I will let the audience know the tagline: "You are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation." Stay tuned for another couple of minutes to see who you can come and listen to next week. See you there. Hey everyone, Wade Franson here, and I'm in the studio with Dr. Devin Singh, who's an associate professor of religion at Dartmouth College. But not just any religion. You may have heard of the health, wealth, and prosperity gospel. Well, I think Devin is sort of the anti-prophet of that. We'll find out. Maybe he's a non-prophet prophet. In any case, his focus is economics, and the show title is God, Mammon, and the Ethics of Exchange. Welcome to the studio, Dr. Singh.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure having you here, and I'm really excited about having you on the show. This is a topic that's of deep concern to me as we try to navigate towards a more just world and build the kingdom of God. And without understanding this topic, we're kind of at an impasse and clueless. Your focus is on economics and religion and faith. Why?
Well, I mean, certainly it's something that's on a lot of people's minds. Topics of God, religion, spirituality preoccupy a lot of people's concerns, and we have money on our minds a lot as well. So these are two driving forces in our lives and in society globally, and so they seem like important topics to tackle. And it so happens that they have a lot to say to one another, and as I've discovered in my research, they have been shaping and informing one another really for millennia. Shaping how each side of the equation, if you will, the God side and the money markets economic side, understand themselves, understand each other, and are represented in the world.
Well, I think as society becomes ever more complex, and as the human species integrates globally on a planet that since the 60s we understand from Earthrise, the planet seen as from space, is the Garden of Eden, a blue-green jewel floating through space. And this is it, and we got to get it right here. Traditionally, religion, and this is all over Jesus' teachings, has taught us personally an individual to not serve two masters, to lay up treasure in heaven, to be just stewards, but it's been more at the personal level. And what we're talking about now, economics, is how to take that personal responsibility for true, right, ethical management, and then somehow build a society that integrates that into our economic theories. Is that sort of what you're working on here?
To an extent, yeah. I'm certainly interested in how Christian thought has thought about money, wealth, responsibility, justice, ethics. Often I focus on where it's gone wrong and where I point out the ways that it has perhaps surprisingly or counterintuitively added to some of the problems and complications that it's trying to address. But I'm certainly interested in what in terms of its kind of moral and ethical teachings, might contribute to thinking about more just and sustainable societies. Absolutely.
Well, I can't wait till 224. Episode 224 on February 24th. There's some amazing math going on there, some economy of numbers, right, going on.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to that date, and you should too. Be there for an hour with Dr. Singh, February 24th, God, Mammon, and the Ethics of Exchange. We'll see you there.